When you claim you have finished, you're going to get your mind back.
If a generalized black woman is doing this and being this, that is that is irresponsible.
No,
when you claim you have finished, you're going to get your mind back.
Showing me,
black and proud. Claim you have finished, black and proud.
I think that if
when you claim you have finished, you're going to get your mind back.
a page,
what is the status of people who have FBA?
I'm telling you. When you claim you have finished, you're going to get your mind back.
That's why I was laughing, because
I am claim you African.
I'm not saying the framework doesn't do a thing, but
become a part of it.
We've been
embrace
forward to black men
become a part of it.
Being in control. We
become a part of it.
Only
embrace it.
That those one of the best stories I've ever heard.
Embrace it. When you claim you have finished, you're going to get your mind
that
back.
mental growth takes place. It's been misled by leadership, for instance, that thinking you can consume.
When you claim you have finished, you're going to get your mind back. Black and I'm proud. Claim you're African. Black and I'm proud. I'm telling you.
Peace and power, family. Dr. Daw back up in the building again. Welcome. Got a special guest in the studio again today. Just gonna have to call him a family member because I'm gonna continuously ask him to come back.
Yes, sir.
Because he's a profound brother in the communities. And look, sisters, y'all haven't made any noise, but I do want to make it really clear. Y'all haven't said anything, but I've been in this community for a long time. Well, I think so, more than most of my life. So what I want to say is in my entire adult life, I want to say that reach out to me. Y'all haven't even said anything yet, but I will tell you, look, if y'all don't know, and I don't think it's always bad, that sisters don't say yes is easy to everything. You know what I mean? I'm not saying the brothers that bring on is easy, but what I am saying is sisters have learned to say no to some degrees a little bit more than we do. And not necessarily no, or they take a little bit time to reflect on things. They just don't jump on things. And sometimes, so reach out to your dear brother and holler at me because I want those minds, especially those who want to come into the actual studio, in Baltimore, in the surrounding areas. You in Philly, this ain't too far. If you in DC, this ain't too far. If you in, even if you in NY, come down, get some crab cakes. If you eat that and then shoot on back up, it ain't too far. We can go down to Richmond and all that type of thing. Come on up. All right, so come in, holler at your boy, Dr. Daw. I'm looking for you all to reach out to me. That's just historically. I'm just going to be honest. I know I've done a lot of panel discussions. They be like, so where are the sisters at? I say, boy, if you knew how much work I did to try to get a sister. But nonetheless, I honestly, just personally, I don't always think it's a problem. I think culturally there's people identify and take on certain roles. Like people might say to me, like, where's your wife at? My wife is running a whole different aspect of this institution. That doesn't mean that she ain't getting on this mic. I will not be able to force her on this mic. If you want me to still live, she ain't getting on this mic. Believe what I'm saying. And she used Nas really well. So I'm not messing with her. But again, family, today's topic is Pan-Africanism, Intra-Conflict, class analysis versus a cultural analysis. Now, I'm not sure if I ever come across the term a cultural analysis. I always hear people, quote unquote, say a class analysis, or these people lack a class analysis. So I said, well, okay, let's do I also think there's a lack of a cultural analysis. And then, to me, I'll just be quiet. And I'm introduce my guests. But nonetheless, come in the studio, family, share the video, share the link. Let's get the numbers up because it's going to be a powerful conversation. I'm just gonna let it go where it go, and I'm gonna talk to my brother about some very deep and potentially polarizing issues in our community, or concerns or struggles, I would say. So with no further ado, I have dear brother Dayvon Love in the building, family. He's back.
Glad to be with you again, bro.
Appreciate the you coming in. And I'm excited about today's conversation because as I sit here and I see this stuff going on. I say, who will be one of the best to really discuss these things or discuss these things with? And honestly, without feeling like I'm gonna get my neck torn off, just to be really honest with you, you know.
Say a little bit more about the aspects of the conversation that have been controversial, because I have an idea, but I'm curious, even when you called and mentioned the conversation, because I know of some of the contentious ideological clashes, but I'm curious how that's shown up for you in conversations you've had that led you to the statement you just made.
Well, let me even, and we can expand this past just the title of class and cultural analysis, because it's so much more than that. I would say those who tend to say they're left-leaning or leftist, Pan-Africanists, versus those who they would. I never knew I was a cultural nationalist until I went to Red Emma's one day, and the brother told me, "You a cultural nationalist." He was like, "No," he said, what's the brother name? He's a therapist here in Baltimore too. Can't think of his name, but he came in there. He's like, "Brother Ausar, I want to just thank you for the work that you're doing, and man, you the center and all these type of things." But he said, "Brother, dashikis and incense ain't going to do it. I mean, I'll be remiss." And I was like, "Okay." And I mean, like, he was like, he gave me the whole like shaking my hand. I appreciate what you're doing. Then I asked him what he was doing. Justin Miles, I think it was. Justin Miles, is that his name? The brother Justin. He's a therapist, and he used to do this Black Power meditation group at the something temple. But he came, I was like, "What?" I was like, "What?" I say, "So you tell me what you doing." And then he started talking about what he was doing. I was like, I mean, we've done that, or we're doing that. He started talking about meditation. I'm like, okay, is that what you call revolutionary? I'm not saying it's not necessary. It's not a part of it. He started talking about gardening. I was like, okay, is that what do you think people do with the dashikis on? They probably garden more than you. I mean, like, I just didn't understand the conversation. But then that's one part of it. Then it's also just identity in general. Me and my dear, but there you go, Dr. Jared Ball, Dr. Jared Ball, we talked about this thing around identity, and we talk about it often. I've talked to you about identity, right? And identity is a real tough topic in our community. And I'll be what I see. I'm not saying this is everyone, but what I've seen is that typically those who deal with the culture aspect more, I'm not saying that both sides don't do a little bit of both, but those who are really into the culture, they're about this ideology and culture, and it's about that mental health, and it's about that psychology, and it's about spirituality, and it's about all these things, and about the African personality. And then you deal with people like, and they're like, oh, they're typically like into health and nutrition, and you know, this is how Africans do it, and all that type of thing. And then you have people on the other end is like, well, I mean, it's just about revolution and materialist change and this type of thing. And then they might pick up a cigarette. I'm just saying it's just like two different worlds going on. I'm not saying there's no crossover, but what I'm saying is I hear this critique on both sides. I'm hearing this idea around this Marxist analysis, and we can't deal with this Marxist analysis. And it's like this fight going back and forth. And it's like, well, some protecting Marx, and the other one's like, no, let's get rid of him. And then it's kind of like this middle ground that I'm hearing, but it's like, I don't think they ever reached a point. And then I'm also hearing like, I'll be honest, Dr. Ball was sitting here the other day. Dr. Ball was sitting, he was like, and I didn't even catch it until I looked at it. He was like, well, what did he say to me? He was like, well, you can change your name to Kwame, middle name to Kwame, and put a dashiki on. And when I was talking about identity and the essentialness of, I mean, this the struggles with all with identities, liberal white identity. And just in academia, what I've seen, teaching master students, especially doctoral students, to me, the higher they go up in the mental health realm, the more indoctrinated they become with what I call white feminist thought. What they become more indoctrinated with white liberal ideology, and you cannot get them out of it. Dr. Ball was like, well, they can basically choose an identity, and basically they'll get to this and they'll find their most radical form of it. Now, I don't know if personally, I don't think I see identity as that simple. I told him I would think about it afterwards. Because I think there's some identities, most of them, quite like Dr. Ball's same argument about movies. He says, well, and I agree with his analysis of movies. Like, if you look at Malcolm X, it might not. What is the data showing? What is statistics showing about that actually bringing about a revolutionary, creating a revolutionary, or creating someone who's more complacent with the system? And saw Malcolm's transition, and then this. By the end of the movie, he became more multicultural and all these type of things. And I will argue that the same argument that Dr. Ball and others have about Dr. Ball for sure, because I agree with that analysis, but I think that's the same thing when we're talking about identity. So again, I bring up the idea of even like issues of like LGBTQ plus community. Now that might be a touchy one. See, again, I think we have to be able to distinguish between the person and the identity, because the identity label itself, the identity represents some political underpinnings. There's some political ideas that go along with it, even if the person who ascribes to it or subscribes to it doesn't even know. Because I'm not coming for a person who's oriented sexually in this way or that way, but I often bring up Dr. Cleo Monago and his pushback and his understanding of it, but also just the fight that I have with my students daily who believe that Pan-Africanism, period, Pan-Africanism itself is Eurocentric. And the reason why they believe it's Eurocentric because they're feminist ideas. And and I know that's a catching word because some people might call themselves radical feminists and all these type of things, but I'm just going to be honest. That intersectional framework, and a lot of us say we are, but we don't even know the core of the ideas and how these ideas are still pervasive, even if you throw revolutionary on the front of it. And then these ideas of how they keep these dichotomies in our communities, these fights, these wars, whether it be ethnicity, whether it be gender, whether it be class, or what have you. So I don't know if that's a bit of a drop for you.
Yeah.
And that's what I want to kind of talk about.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, no, you put a lot on the table. So I'm gonna start at a place where I don't think there's enough conversation, which is our people, human beings in general, I think have a tendency to build their identities based off of traumas that they have not sufficiently wrestled with. And I start with that because as you know, I said the last time I was here and people hear me say a lot, like politics is a combat sport. It is warfare. So those who get on the battlefield of politics, there's certain expectations that are different than if we just having a conversation. We have an intellectual conversation. Right. They're two different kinds of conversations. And me as a person who, like, my work is political, I've had to do two things simultaneously, which is fortify myself and deal with whatever traumas that I'm faced with that might impact decisions I make politically. So do that fortification of myself and also be very clear that I'm operating from the vantage point of what is my political objective? Like, what is the thing or things that I'm trying to get accomplished? Yeah. And when that is your foundation, when that is the way that you approach the work, then it provides, I think, some clarity as to how to navigate some of the kind of intellectual tensions that you raise. So, for example, again, we talk about identity. There are a lot of people that gravitate towards African-centeredness or Afrocentricity or whatever moniker people put on it. There are people that gravitate to it because they feel like they're missing something, right? There's a part of them that feels healed by the ideas, by the concepts, right? So there's a way that people almost have a relationship to traditional African culture, spirituality, and intellectual ideas, the way that people do religion, right? Where people become, and I think that is those who describe themselves as materialist, their criticism of, quote unquote, cultural nationalism is that I think what they're observing is a religiosity and how people relate to the information, which I think, people are entitled to. There's nothing inherently wrong with it. But when you are engaging like culture and intellectual ideas from a perspective where there's religiosity in it, then the way that your disposition then becomes about defending your thing, as opposed to what is its efficacy for our broader community. Those are two different things. So again, another way of saying that is, and use the example of the brother that talked about the cultural nationalists you wearing dashikis. What they are in the best cases, what they're criticizing is people making political things about proselytizing. If I get more people to believe what I believe, then the world will be better. Right. And that just isn't true. But for a lot of people, it feels good. The same way that a person who's Jehovah's Witness or whatever, recruiting to their religion, if I get more people to be a part of my tribe, the world will be a better place. That is insufficient. Right. But there are people who I think strongly feel that way. On the other end of the spectrum, one of the things that a purely Marxist analysis is deficient in is a sufficient analysis of culture. Right? Because those who have and operate from a much more doctrinaire Marxist perspective, they see the vector of human interaction and organization on the basis of relationship to capital, accumulation of resources. I think that is important. But similar to what I said about the cultural nationalist, for whom culture becomes the experience is some ways religiosity. I think similar folks that are very doctrinaire in terms of their relationship to ideas around Marxism also develop it almost like it's religiosity, where if you do not present a sufficient Marxist analysis, then that means you're not actually interested in revolution. So if you're interested in revolution, then you got to be part of, you got to have Marxism as central to your analysis, because so many of the more modern day revolutionaries, Marxism was a part of their analysis. So all of that to say, so the first part in terms of response to what you laid out is, if you are engaging these ideas from the vantage point of trying to accomplish a set of political goals to improve the quality of life of the community, then religiosity feels like a waste of time. And that's often how I feel in the context of some of the conversations that you're referencing, where it's like, what is the impact that you can have on the broader community? So if you are focused on the culture, then what are the ways that you've created an institution where people can be positively impacted by the value of African culture and spirituality? And that's what I'm interested in. I'm not always interested in what iteration will form of it, because there are different versions that might be legitimate. But what is the material impact that you're able to have with that particular use of culture? And similarly, those with a more doctrinaire Marxist approach, okay, well then tell me, what is your ability to impact the material conditions of Black people? And to me, that is, and in a world where that becomes the analysis, then those two things aren't that much at odds with each other. They're just different areas of work. I think the cultural part deals much more with our the psycho-existential elements of being a person of African descent, right? So again, working through traumas, developing sense of like self-pride, dealing with the kind of injected oppression, like that is the place where culture is a unique and important technology of addressing the conditions of our people. And whereas in the world that I'm, in more directly in politics, again, it's a question of, are you able to impact the distribution of resources and power, right? Tell me your ability to do that. And then you can see the value on one hand in the other when you come from it from the vantage point of, well, what are you actually trying to accomplish? Because you can go into a rabbit hole. Like there's a generation of scholarship of race versus class, Marxist versus African centered. There's a whole generation of scholarship of folks kind of navigating that. And again, from my vantage point, there's value in both. But I think there are ways that if you're squarely in one camp, it's almost like people have a personal interest because it's their religion to be like, they the Crips over there, I'm the Blood. So they I think that's what you're getting from people.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I think though, and I think they overlook one another, like, because I think that, just for the sake of conversation, one of the points that I think is fair from the from the side of those who call themselves more materialists is that lots of times the political aspect, what we call political in the sense of a class analysis, let me stay there. Because, see, I struggle with this a bit. Let me just be real honest, because I think that sometimes when people speak about this dichotomy, I don't see the dichotomy so much in those that I particularly gravitate towards.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm not a very religious person, believe it or not. Like, you know, I'm not a person. I'm not religious at all, to be honest with you. And I can intellectualize spirituality.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing anybody can say to me about spirituality or religion. Nobody's going to scare me about anything. Nothing. I can have the conversation with I don't care what you believe in or don't believe in. You know, I can probably ride the train with you. You know, but I think I struggle with the conversation much when I think about people like Dr. Amos Wilson.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you can say that some of his points, when we look back at it, we can refine those things. But I struggle with the idea that he and people like Dr. Marimba Ani even. Now, Dr. Marimba Ani, even though she speaks about spirituality, she typically brings this back to material conditions.
Absolutely.
So it's kind of like, I think that when people look at them often, and I'm not a spooky person, I'm just going to be real frank. They kind of look over their analyses and also the idea of culture. And what do I mean by culture? I mean, like, when we say culture, we're not just talking about even just the way that you do things, or because people typically don't get there. They typically talk about, like, you know, the dance and song and all that. But you can go to a deeper level and say how you do things, right? This is how we do things. But then you can go to another level, and I'm just thinking about this right now in real time, is to say what kind of culture is required to bring about that sovereignty that we seek. And can we do this piecemeal, everybody type of approach? This everybody has their own identity, or do we have to have this similar ideology? So I think that is the crux of much of what I'm talking about and what I see in academia, which is more like a liberal framework where anything that presents a culture of with any type of norms becomes the enemy. What do you say to that?
Yeah. So let's take Marcus Garvey. Marcus Garvey, as many of your listeners I'm sure know, founded and developed an organization at the largest membership of any Black organization in modern American history, right? And so a lot of the what are called cultural nationalists, look up to Marcus Garvey, see him as, the epitome of revolution.
Yeah.
Now you'll have some of our, more doctrinaire Marxist folks that'll say, well, he was a capitalist, he believed in capitalism, and so devalue the value of what he did because, they describe him as someone who was committed to capitalism. Right? Yeah. And I think there are legitimate critiques of Marcus Garvey.
Absolutely.
Right. And two of them that are related to this is he did have a fascination with kind of royal European ritual, right? Emperors and stuff like that.
Right.
And he did disparage socialism and communism. Right. Now, the challenge sometimes is that the Marxists, if you take the approach that I started with, which is that people, it's almost like religiosity to it. So if you're on the Marxist side of things, right, and it is the thing that is your bright line, your litmus test for who's legitimate, then there are folks who are in that doctrinaire Marxist lane that will say, well, Marcus Garvey, his commitment to capitalism means that he wasn't a force for good for Black people.
Yeah.
Right. Now, I think a person who's not in a camp, who has actually read what Marcus Garvey has said about communism, you can read what he says and say, okay, there's some larger intellectual disagreements that I'll have about the way he's characterizing the theory of communism and socialism. But what he actually says, because he says in Thoughts and Philosophies of Marcus Garvey, he actually says that capitalism is bad, but he says it's better than socialism.
Mm-hmm.
And his argument wasn't about the theory of capitalism or socialism. His argument was, if communism means building worldwide coalitions with working class white people, well, we know they racist. They exclude us from their unions.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Their vision of the world is a Eurocentric one.
Mm-hmm.
So his perspective is, I don't want to hand over control of the means of production to a class of white folks who have demonstrated historically that they don't see black people as human beings.
Right.
So to me, again, if I'm not in a camp, I can read that and say, okay, while I think that Garvey's theory of communism and capitalism wasn't as well developed as I liked,
Mm-hmm.
he is still revolutionary in that he's thinking about the distribution of power, and he's thinking about it in the context of what would this working people of the world coalition look like with black people. So you can see that, and and again, even if you come from a political analysis where Marxism is a part of your philosophical vernacular, you should be able to read that and be like, okay, I can see the value in that critique.
Yeah.
I think what happens a lot of times is it's like it ends the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
There's a brother named Brian Quoba who wrote a recent book about Hubert Henry Harrison, which I think it's a fantastic book. But I told him, I said, one of my criticisms of the book is that I think that he overstates Garvey's commitment to capitalism. That I think that he mischaracterizes what Garvey actually believed about it, because the brother Quoba, his kind of political socialization was through the Socialist Party, right? That's where he kind of came of political age. So to me, when I read his book and saw that, it was like, oh, that tracks with the way that folks, again, that are more doctrinaire with a Marxist analysis would read a person like Marcus Garvey in a way that I think if you're not vested in the ideological combat, it's like, it's simple. Okay, so the theory of capitalism, communism, he wasn't well developed on, but the insight that he's offering about why he was opposed to communism makes sense, even if you have a Marxist analysis. But I think that's the thing, that because of the camps, it just makes it difficult to have real serious, rigorous conversations, because then it becomes an emotional conversation. It becomes like, oh, you said some fucked up shit about Garvey, y'all white, y'all read Marx, y'all white, or, oh, you are all black things are good kind of person, all skin folk and kinfolk, and people retreat to their camps, as opposed to being able to have the kind of analysis that I just mentioned.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And let me just backtrack a bit and say, I may have said it already, but one of the reasons why I wanted to have this conversation with you is because I realized how well you tend to navigate these spaces without much criticism.
I imagine there's criticism. I probably don't hear about it.
They still allow you in the space, you know, and I haven't heard them. I mean, let me see. I really, honestly, and I haven't heard them. Maybe Brother Jabari says back in the day when he saw you, he said, well, let go of those little, those guys who do the political stuff. But
like, I give you an example. There are people in Baltimore who are more doctrinaire in their Marxist analysis, who haven't said it to me directly, but I know have said things like, oh, they're capitalist, like LBS, they're capitalist.
Oh, yeah?
Right. And they say it, and it goes to the camps thing that I was saying. They say it because, and let me go back to where I started when I talked about like people's perspective when it's based in like their own traumas. One of those traumas is that I mentioned politics as a combat sport. And I find generally, there are a handful of exceptions, but I find that generally a lot of the black folks that have gone into the academy that see themselves as like really deep on revolutionary politics, I find many of them to have what I call a loser's mentality. And what I mean by that, in terms of having a loser's mentality is they come the thrust of their intellectual work is not rooted on how can we actually win on the political battlefield, right? A lot of it is like intellectual jousting. You need me to
No, I'm the for some reason is going in and out of focus, but the only thing you could do is just be less movement, but that's the only. But I don't want to stop your flow, and I'm thinking like, do I really want to change the lens right now? But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so yeah, I think so people have so with the loser's mentality, that what has happened is that it's easier to be in an intellectual environment where there's no expectation that you have to do anything about the ideas you bring to the table. Right. And so when all you get to do is to be able to just talk about the ideas, but no accountability for actually having to put them into practice, then what ends up happening is people form theories or opinions about people's politics that are actually more about the fact that, because the people that I think call us capitalists, they call us capitalists because we're effective politically. And that for a lot of them, the system of white supremacy and capitalism is so strong that anybody who is impactful in the political landscape, they got to be capitalists because they have conversations with people that are Democrats, right? Or they have conversations with people that aren't socialists, right? That they appear on platforms that are deemed mainstream. So they must be a part of the capitalist class, you know what I'm saying? Because they're actually being able to make some headway, right? And so I find that in both camps, I think there's a lot of like losers mentality.
So what do you find? Okay, so do you don't find the same exact thing though? What do you find on the cultural side?
On the cultural side, I think a lot of times what happens is it's like, and I've had people be critical of me in this way, where it's like, focus on like you're engaging the political landscape. That's the white man shit. Focus on us. Focus on our consciousness, like focus on building cultural institutions so that Black people have a sense of themselves.
Right.
Don't do that. That politics shit, that's the white man shit. Don't do that. So that's the version that comes from cultural nationalists, but what's called the cultural nationalist camp. And again, I just think in both categories, look, shit is hard. Like doing something that has a material impact on the world is extremely difficult. You know what I'm saying? So that's a part of why, I mentioned earlier, like people that call us capitalists, I think a big part of that is that it is hard to actually engage the existing systems from a revolutionary standpoint and be impactful. And so if you're engulfed in, I just want to talk my shit. I just want to talk my ideas and I want to be right. I want to be seen as right about my ideas. That's not work.
Yeah. I always say to myself, how can we be so certain, like we believe that we have the answer? I mean, like none of us have accomplished the thing that we're talking about. Now I do get it, like to some degree there has to be some level of proselytization in our minds to get buy-in. But I it leads me to, I don't know if I should throw this question out now, but maybe we can have a dialogue. It leads me to think whether or not how realistic we are. Just overall, like I'll be honest with you, I was so disappointed today. I was leaving out, about to go down the street to get a latte because I'm tired. And I turned on Instagram and I saw a brother here in Baltimore. I haven't seen him in a while. He was one of the loudest people, one of the loudest mouths, just going into different political spaces and just like tearing them apart. And I saw him today saying, we not no Africans. We've always been here. I know this is kind of that, but this is like what's on my heart a little bit right now. Like this is more of it. Like we ain't none of that. We in his mind, and it's like this story about my mother and my auntie, and then they actually denigrated men and said those sorry Negroes the ones who told you these other things, my mama ain't never told me that. My auntie ain't never told me that. And there's this idea that we are now Native American. I don't even know where that came from. I can't remember why I'm bringing this up right now. But that is what is kind of, I don't know where, I don't even know how I got there. But how realistic is it? That's the question. How realistic do you think Pan-Africanism as a whole, both sides, especially if they, let me just leave it right there.
So, and I mean, and this extends from kind of where I left off, which is, I don't spend a whole lot of time around folks that are aligned with me ideologically. I don't spend a lot of time with folks that are aligned with me worldview wise, because the world is a mixture of people that have different perspectives, thoughts. And so for me, the best way to teach people something or to make a point that you want to see carried out into the world is to do it, is to do the thing that you are saying should be done. And I think that part of the challenge, your question, like, is it realistic? I mean, again, in both camps, I find them both to not take seriously the work of what it takes to do things that people can see and experience, so that people then are endeared to want to know more about what they think. You know what I'm saying? It's like, what good is knowing all this Marxist theory if, okay, so show me then how you applied it so that it works. And I think what happens sometimes is people, again, in both camps, run away from the responsibility of having to demonstrate. Okay, show me the impact. And see, part of what that does is it really does kind of rain down some humility on the conversation when that becomes the standard, right? Because then you can't talk as big. If you got to be accountable for, okay, well then bring it into existence. Then show me how it works. And I think part of the success of LBS being like an explicitly revolutionary Pan-African nationalist organization that is viable in the political landscape here in Maryland is for that reason, that it's like, look, we're gonna do some stuff. It ain't the biggest thing, right? But we're gonna do stuff, and over time, we're gonna show you that this perspective can work. And so it's one of the things that I wish for in both camps. I wish for people to have that as their standard. For how they have the majority of the conversations that they have.
And you know what's interesting? I can kind of I can't even appreciate the things at the level of analysis. I can, because it helps me. you know, and I'm a person that applies things. Now, so I can appreciate that level, but I do at some point though, people begin to lose what the point. The analysis begins to feel like you're getting punched in the eye. Typically, when I hear from people in more cultural spaces, is that these people are defeatists. You kind of said something similar. You said on both sides actually, but on the other side, more materialists, it's kind of like, it's like you see one that are like I would probably say what I see more, the theme being is that there's this very optimistic type of lens that I see from the cultural side.
That's right.
And I see more of a what's the pessimistic side when I see the materialist per se.
See, here's the thing, right? I think, again, for those that are more tethered to what we're describing as a cultural nationalist perspective, the reality is that a lot of that stuff makes us feel good. And I don't say that to trivialize it, right? Like a lot of that stuff is stuff that makes us feel good. I think the disconnect comes in, and where, again, the Marxist side of it has a legitimate criticism, is that us feeling good is one part of changing the overall arrangement of society such that it doesn't dehumanize us in real political and economic ways. So I have encountered and have observed and heard the cultural nationalist side of things want most of the work to be about, well, we just need to feel more African. If people had the right mentality and felt good how I feel good in the way that African culture makes me feel, then that's going to be our way to liberation. It feels good to believe that. It makes sense to me that a person would believe that. It's just that it's one of those things where it's in order to explain to a person the limitations of that as a central strategy for revolution, it requires a person to communicate to them in a way where it's like, yeah, that feel good to you, but that doesn't change the overall reality. And to a person for whom is really strong in that, that's a difficult thing to hear. You know what I'm saying? If I've organized my life in a way where it's like, yeah, the cultural nationalist stuff makes me feel good. There's kids that I've raised up and I've seen them, you know, then it don't feel good to hear what a Marxist analysis would be in terms of what it would take to do revolution. Because a part of it is like, damn, do I really want to fight these white people? Do I really want to have to fight the system? And I think there's some people that want revolution that doesn't require actually having to do some fighting. So that's my sense that I get sometimes from the cultural nationalist side, which is, can we just do some positive shit and not do all this political fighting?
Oh man, so I appreciate that, but then on the other side, and I get that, like I agree with that wholeheartedly, that, you know, let's just integrate without assimilating some kind of way. But then there's the, and we're not going to really deal with the structural changes needed, and what would that really look like? What would that take? That's scary. Matter of fact, no, we're not. You know, no, we can. You know, this is a spiritual war. You know what I mean?
And this goes to Dr. Ball. So the point around the Black buying power argument, where, you know, the place where that concept is the most important in my view is on this question of, we cannot think we can't positively think our way out of white supremacy. You know what I'm saying? And buying power, the argument allows people to say, if we just come together, then that's going to solve the problem of white supremacy. And again, to say that is not true don't feel great. To some people, it feels defeatist. I think on the other side, though, in terms of, again, those with a more doctrinaire Marxist analysis, I think there are ways that they diminish the importance and role of culture in their own analysis. And here's I think actually one of the best examples of this is that a lot of the kind of doctrinaire Marxist folks talk about a class analysis, but I would argue that a lot of the ones that I know who are very, you know, Marxist in their doctrine and perspective, a lot of them themselves don't have great connections or relationships to networks of working class Black people, right? That working class people, for a lot of the folks that have the, you know, center the Marxist analysis themselves, don't have an interaction, a base of support from working class Black people. And it is my observation that it's typically the cultural nationalists that actually have a more authentic relationship to working class Black people than many of the kind of doctrinaire Marxist folks who talk about a class analysis and working class Black people, but themselves are not a part of networks of Black people that are working class. Because if they were, I think there are ways that, you know, again, I'm gonna use the buying power argument since we're talking about it. You know, we know Dr. Ball, you know, watches the program, is that there are some people in our community for whom the buying power argument is, for them, is about, well, the idea gives them a sense of purpose. It gives them a sense of, you know, strength. It gives them a sense of togetherness. And so that's why a lot of working class Black people, I think, they gravitate to that concept, to the buying power concept, because it's like, yeah, I want to be a part of something bigger. You know what I mean? And so if you are making that argument, you have to account for the fact that, you know, for Black people, you know what I'm saying, that are working class, something that gives me an affirmative sense of my identity, like a worker is not an affirmative identity. Like, it's one of your identities, it's, you know, but like being an African person, like a Black person, that's some shit you can believe in. It's like, I'm a part of this group that has like cultural significance that enlivens. And it is my sense that a lot of times a overemphasis on Marx allows people to have theoretical conversations about Black working class people, but don't actually interact with them and don't actually have a theory that accounts for what it means to actually move working class Black people in a revolutionary direction.
Yeah, I appreciate that. When I think about the idea of Marx, a Marxist analysis or Marxism, and I struggle with the idea that we can't utilize that as something that we consider in our analyses. But I also struggle with the idea that we have to center it so much.
Right.
And I think that that's where I find that the cultural analysis is essential. And I find that the Marxist or what have you analysis is essential as well, because it does have us thinking about class and socioeconomic status and all these different ways that we are being oppressed other than race, or have you. And then also how people actually serve as sellouts in our own community in ways. But I think, though, when I look at it from let's say, an African-centered perspective, which I think a lot of people who just say, no, you just got to be very strong on that. This is a Marxist or even socialism or social, like this, real strong with it. And like, if you don't say you're a socialist, and I might ask you a question, how you think about it. If you don't say you're a socialist, then you aren't doing anything. I mean, I've heard these type of things. These cultural people. I don't have anything to do with any of these cultural African-centered folks. But one thing I think that's not being considered many times when people say stuff like that is the psychological impact, that level of attention, even the name. Like, I know I get it. Like, as an academic, like, why are we getting so caught up on Marx? If he has an analysis, I mean, I've been there, not just Marx, with a number of theories, because I'm a clinician. So I have a whole treasure trove of theories that I can pull from. But at the same time, I realized, though, what psychological impact does that have on our community when we have to center these particular theories to the degree that we do?
Yeah. And I think that's where the challenge is. That's where the challenge is, because again, there are these extremes where some of the cultural nationalists is like, yeah, Marx, that's just white, right? And then you have, again, the Marxists, it's like, oh, if there's no Marxism, they're not serious about revolution. I think, so a couple of things. One, I think Murembani's book, Yurugu, is one of the most important books of theory in the 20th century. In many respects, I would put it in the category of Marxist Capital, right? Kind of his foundational text. I put Yurugu as our Capital, right? So the way, and I would say, similar, you have people like Walter Rodney, right? That uses, Marx, but uses it, and theorizes culture into it as well. So I think a part of what happens, and again, going back to kind of where we started, which is, I think there are some people who their intellectual identity is more about them than it's actually about advancing an understanding of what it takes to make revolution. You know what I'm saying? Because I've read Marx. There are aspects of Marx that, other Marxists have critiqued that are useful for African-centered, scholarship. I'll give you an example. One of the things that is a deficiency in Marx, because it definitely comes out of like European Enlightenment theory, right? And so that kind of Cartesian dualism, spirit and material being disconnected from each other. Yeah. And so I think one of the ways that manifests itself is that Marx only saw revolutionary potential in urban centers.
Mhm.
The countryside was innately backwards,
Mhm.
right? And an anti-revolutionary, place to organize. Well, you take someone like Mao, right,
Mhm.
who theorized the countryside is a site for revolution.
Mhm.
Then when you think about like the Haitian Revolution,
Mhm.
right, or you think about even some of the, the armed rebellions here in, what's called the United States,
Mhm.
you see the countryside
Mhm.
being a place where revolution was fermented,
Mhm.
right? So I'm using that as an example to say that, again, if you're not committed to a camp where the intellectual product is a part of your identity, you can step back and say, okay, I can see the utility of the places where Marx provides some interesting analysis of political economy.
Right.
And also now part of it, sometimes I think people will say Marx is white and haven't read it.
Mhm.
You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
And I think, we should read it,
Right.
because so many of the revolutionaries in our tradition have read Marx. So I think it's important to read it.
Mhm.
But if you've read it, you can actually have real critiques.
Yeah.
But those critiques are for the purpose of how to ferment revolution.
Mhm.
And I think that's really comes down to that. If you're asking these questions and using these intellectual resources for the purpose of making revolution,
Mhm.
then for me, it doesn't become nearly as controversial as it is. But I think it becomes controversial because, again, people just have a stake in the identity that they formed based on that intellectual camp. And whenever I see that that's happening, I retreat from the conversation because the ceiling is low for what you're gonna be able to get out of that. Because people been having these debates for the last generation.
I want to see if we could venture out to and maybe loop back around at some point on some of these things, like some very concrete ways these show up in our community today, and not just like Marx, but just leftist type of. So I don't hear many people from the culture community call themselves leftists. That's why I'm saying leftists. Some people might say, "Oh, left is what is left of the king" or something like that. But when I'm saying leftists, I mean more of the people who will call themselves radicals and leftists and scientific socialism and all that type of thing. And I'm saying cultural, more like people who, I'm sorry, like more the Amos Wilson and Lumumba and to the extreme. So in that direction, is that when I think about culture has this way of telling you how things are to be done, how you should see the world, experience the world.
That's right.
And
I often use, Karenga for whatever political things that, critiques I have of, him and his organization. His definition of culture, the totality of thought and practice from which a people sustains itself, celebrates itself, introduces itself to history and humanity, right? So that totality of thought and practice, like culture is a lens by which you navigate the world.
Absolutely.
You know what I'm saying? And see, to me, that's why Ani's book, Yurugu, is so important, because it gives culture the depth that it deserves as a important unit of analysis. In many ways, and Dr. Clark has said this on numerous occasions in his lectures, that in Western societies, it makes sense to say that class was a dominant force that mediates human interaction. But in non-Western societies, it's spirituality and culture, right? That is the primary unit that mediates human interactions. And so I think that for leftists who reduce culture to just its mere artifacts, as opposed to what you're describing, which is like it is the way you do things, is how you wire. It is a way of putting it. It's like the operating system in a computer. It's how it processes. It's how you find stuff. And so, but again, I think a lot of times leftists demean culture, in part because a kind of doctrinaire standard leftist thinking about race and culture is that race and culture are things that are produced as kind of like an aside. It's like it's an accoutrement to a series of relations that are mediated by class. Well, what we know, and this goes to like when we understand what colonialism is, right? Like the past 500 years of human history has been marked by the project of European domination of the world. And the very basis of Western civilization is the dehumanization of people of African descent to take us out of respectful commentary of history. And so you have like Egyptology emerged for the purpose of theorizing Egypt out of Africa, because Europeans, it would be harder for them to justify enslaving Africans if ancient civilizations that were advanced belonged to us. So Egyptology emerged for the purpose of helping them soothe their morality by saying, well, these are lesser people, right? That serves as a foundation. And there's a term that I'm gonna borrow from Frank Wilderson's Afro-pessimism, this notion of like libidinal economy. So for those, super academic and leftists, it is a place where they don't do a good job of analyzing, which is why a lot of them have so much problems with Afro-pessimism, which is that this notion of libidinal economy. So there's political economy, Marx got that down, but then there's what Frank Wilderson describes as libidinal economy, which is like the economy of desire, pleasure, fear, anxiety. That those things are not things that are generated exclusively by political economy, right? Our society is structured on notions of Black inferiority. It's structured on notions of inherent Black criminality, right? Like our society is structured on anti-African notions. That is the bedrock of Western civilization. And so that we live in a society where white people represent less than 10% of the world's population, but occupy a position of dominance in all of the political and economic dominance in all the arenas of civil society. So that arrangement of settler colonialism, it's not a coincidence that white people collectively control the resources of the world. And so that's where culture comes in, because how white folks have been socialized and the cultural meanings that they have been indoctrinated in become all of our business, because they control everything. And so those are things that, again, are not explainable primarily through a Marxist analysis. It requires analysis that go beyond political economy. Now, what Marxists will say is, or leftists will say is, they'll say, well, there's no objective way, there's no objective scientific way to quantify that. Class relations, you can have a scientific analysis. Things like culture and spirituality, it isn't scientific enough. And this is where the Eurocentricity comes in, right? Because traditional African culture has a different perspective on science, where spirituality and science confirm the same reality. But to a Marxist who, again, you're coming out of the Enlightenment, Eurocentric Enlightenment tradition, can't conceptualize culture and spirituality as having a science to it, because it doesn't conform to what white folks have told us science is. You know what I'm saying? So I think, that's what a Marxist will say about culture, but I think that's the place where they're most deficient, is a rigorous analysis of culture, that they don't see culture as just the artifacts. They see it as like, this is the way that people are told to make meaning of the world, right? And that overlaps with, but it's independent of political economy.
And with all of that, I would say that we have to be very intentional about our culture. Now, it becomes a struggle, because I also realize a lot of people who identify more with the left-leaning, they're more about, again, where I was getting to, was more about this freedom to identify in ways that I want to identify, almost similar to like liberals, but a little more radical, I guess, if they would say, in their analysis, and more about overthrowing some things, perhaps, versus just maintaining how it is, and we just kind of like just accept everybody as like a lot of liberals, and and that's a bunch of excuse me. But then it gets to this point, though. Now that is what happens when I speak to, I would say most of my students are either liberal or left-leaning, if they know it or not.
Right.
And so they struggle with those African-centered and those even they see even Pan-Africanism. They think of Umar Johnson, and he's no. I don't think there's anyone more liberal than he is. But none. He just does what he wants to do. But nonetheless, they think that is a very to someone who sees the world through this particular lens, they tend to see that as oppressive. So they begin to see culture from a African-centered lens as oppressive, versus Yeah, those more. So what do you say about that?
So that what that is an example of is normalizing or universalizing white people's way of the world being structured.
Yeah.
Right. And what I mean by that is, so I'll give you an example. One of the notions that is seen as like, you know, penultimate in Western civilization is individual freedom. Right. Individual freedom. Individual freedom is like one of the philosophical foundations of Western civilization.
Yeah.
Right. And so what happens is that if you're socialized in a context where what is considered normal or scientific, as we just kind of talked about a few moments ago, is white people's normal reality, right? You know, white people's, you know, way of being in the world, then many people can't conceive that the notion of individual liberty and making it kind of the pinnacle of freedom can be harmful. So I'm saying that to say that what you're describing, where culture feels oppressive to people who valorize individual liberty.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
There's a way that's where the Enlightenment Eurocentric thinking creeps into Marxism, because then it treats everything that takes away from individual freedom as inherently oppressive. Because what happens is European history narrates itself this way. There were monarchs and serfs and lords that basically had to do what the king said. There was the, you know, Protestant Revolution, Lutheran Revolution, where it was like, no, we want individual liberty. They come to what's now called the United States. They develop this political system that valorizes individual liberty. So what happens is that if all you know is European history and culture, then anything that detracts from individual liberty is like going back to the monarchs of England.
Yeah.
As opposed to if a person actually studied ancient African civilization, our kings were not the kind of kings that were in Europe. Our kings had obligations to the people who they had obligations to their community. They had responsibilities. There were processes by which they could be taken off their throne.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? So if you know ancient African history, then the notion of individual liberty, of taking away individual liberty, is not inherently oppressive. But if all you know is European history and culture, then it takes you back to the monarchs of the Middle Ages in Europe.
Yeah.
And so African culture and adherence to culture to them looks like the oppressive stuff that white folks were fleeing in Europe.
Yeah.
You know, during the Middle Ages.
Absolutely.
You get what I'm saying? So it's just a question of like, when you normalize European history and culture, then they're projecting Europe's civilization onto our stuff.
Yeah.
But a lot of them, particularly the leftists, the Marxists, don't study ancient African civilizations because they've internalized Enlightenment thinking that says that European culture and civilization is the most advanced culture that humans have ever produced. And when you believe that, then you look at us and our cultural stuff through the lens of universalizing white people's history and culture.
And that's exactly what I'm saying. There's so many different ways it shows up. And I hear, and look, I'm very critical of what goes on in our cultural spaces. And I do think it is a fair analysis and critique that many times we can find ourselves slipping into capitalistic ways. I mean, like literally, like revolution is going to be like, even myself, I was doing something called revolutionary real estate investing at one time, right? And in my mind, I'm trying to follow these models, you know, of Black power. And, you know, now I've done that. And I was successful as a business person, but in my mind, I think that's where Dr. Ball's analysis does come in and was very helpful, is that, nah, bro, it ain't just you doing a bad job. You just can't do it this way. You know what I mean? You got to do something a little different. I know you mean well, and you're not these frauds out here, and you're trying to compete with frauds and being real, and that's not going to work, you know, in a way like just being authentic, you know. But I guess what I want to get to is I don't know where I'm trying to get to, but getting back to this individualism, and that's so hard. And I'm telling you, like, I argue if it lacks an African-centered analysis, that it is not complete.
Mm-hmm.
I would argue that if we could incorporate, and some of us do, and I think that's pretty much what you're saying about Dr. Marimba Ani, a more, even if we don't use the word class, whatever you want to do, if that aspect is there,
Mm-hmm.
then I think it's easier. I struggle with the idea that you can do anything. I'll just be real honest with you, and not have an African-centered analysis. And I know people don't say that, but I struggle with it because I've seen how many people don't realize how this country and society is organized, and not necessarily just in the world at this point, as you articulated, because we begin to take these liberties, let me say liberties, as ways of empowerment. And in fact, you just said that. You know, let me just shut up. Hold on, let me think. Do I have anything else? But as a way of empowerment, not knowing that we're weakening our ability to really empower ourselves collectively. And then anything that doesn't match that individual right, like sometimes, like we just have to, at some point, realize that it ain't all about me. Like, I mean, we need to be respected as human beings, but just because I'm a man and I like something that other men don't like, I don't need to make that the issue over top of the greater issue of our people being oppressed and how we are being oppressed. I'm not sure if that makes sense. What I'm
100% in agreement that I think an African-centered analysis is essential, particularly for people of African descent, to analyze the world and develop solutions that are suited for our collective community. I agree with that 100%. And I'm okay with people that don't. Right. And there may be some utility to the perspectives of people that don't. Right. I think, but it goes back to kind of where I started, which is my baseline criteria for intellectual engagement is what is your capacity to take those ideas and to bring them into existence to have a positive impact on our community. And if that's the baseline, then I think it takes out, again, the kind of doctrinaire on both sides. I think that, again, and I'm gonna be real, because you mentioned Red Emmers earlier, right? People have a hard time understanding how to engage in work that requires engaging lots of people without equating it to like being a part of friend groups. And I think a big part of what we see with this is like my group, my friends, we the realists, y'all not. And I think a lot of times that's really what it be about, but people be intellectualizing it, to be honest with you. And so to your point about like the importance of an African-centered lens and analysis, like there are Black folks that I know who identify as socialists who also have an understanding of culture and all of that. You know what I mean? So there are, so I don't want to over totalize. Like, I think there are people that do both and analyze both effectively. But I do think that the importance of having a discussion about the two kind of approaches, so to speak, to Pan-Africanism, is that I think in both cases, I think the challenge is that Pan-Africanists, I would say over the last generation, have withdrew from formal engagement in politics. Like I think most of the Pan-Africanist activity that we see is either in the academy or in kind of cultural spaces. And I think both of those things are important to do. But I think it has created this content, or created a environment where when people think Pan-Africanism, they think of and I hate to say like just the cultural stuff and just the academic stuff, because I do believe that both of those things are important. It gets associated with, in some ways, not being engaged outside of the folks who already agree with us. And I would say that is my biggest criticism of being a Pan-Africanist. That is my biggest criticism, is that there is a general withdrawal from the political landscape. And even more so, a lack of seriousness about engaging people who don't share our beliefs.
So when I say, African-centered analysis, I'm already assuming that they have the others. But what happens, what I see is we have the others, but we put this cultural piece down. I'm not saying those no spooky stuff. I am saying that culture is essential. And when I say African Senate, I typically am talking about Black people from our cultural lens. And
That's right.
as I think of other people should have their own analysis from their cultural reality.
That's right.
So I'm speaking about Black people. And I'm not saying that when I say African Senate, I am not saying that it has to look like you in Africa. You ain't never have to wear dashiki. But we have to have some ideas around culture and what is going to sustain our people, elevate our people, take our people to a new future. I'm talking about, like, there's a lot of things going on that are keeping our people from doing these other things. Because I honestly think that an African Senate analysis you kind of spoke to earlier, I think some of the greatest work we find is in our healers or our psychologists or social workers and clinicians and so on and so forth. Now, we can go a little far sometimes. In fact, that's why I'm writing a new book, because I think we went too far sometimes. I think we over-chemitize things sometimes, where you got to read 17 chapters of Kemet, and we're talking about mental health. And I'm just saying, like, that's a lot. You got to learn all these names. Like, I think we have to consider culture. Even then, like, can our people relate to you? Now have to learn and Amenhotep and Hatshepsut and Akhenaten, and trying to figure out the difference between Tefnut and Gab and whether or not they are real, and if Tutankhamun, like all these different things. I'm like, look, that's just too much. I'm not saying never get there. I'm just saying everybody won't get there. But when I say African Senate, I'm talking about that which is culturally appropriate and sustaining for our people. So I cannot ever be okay without it from my definition. Because now, of course, there's going to be people that don't have it.
Right.
But I will argue, I maintain that they will be lagging behind and they will get in the way. Because I'm not saying this religious dogmatic version of it. I'm saying that when men and women and children are expected to do things in certain ways with flexibility, with some not total like authoritarian or autocratic type of means, but we do have our culture clear and what healing looks like, what liberation looks like, what is expected of you. Because a lot of the liberal stuff is kind of like, it gets back to what you were saying in one of your articles. I just think we're out of order. And what do I mean by that? We're out of order. Like,
maybe let me try this, right? I mentioned earlier, as you know, you and I, again, I know your audience knows and is familiar. White people are less than 10% of the world's population. They occupy a position of economic and political dominance in every arena of civil society. A person that looks at that reality, that is objectively bizarre, right? It is objectively bizarre for a group of people that make up less than 10% of the population to be in a position of political and economic dominance in every arena of civil society around the world, right? That is objectively bizarre.
Absolutely.
So the African Center analysis is a corrective to the bizarre state that the world is in.
Yeah.
And so I think part of the challenge is that, again, most of us, our formal training, our professional training, our formal education, American pop culture, all most people know is European history and culture.
Yeah.
And because that's all they know, a lot of our folks are not capable of an African-centered analysis because they've been so indoctrinated. Now, one of the things that I have found helpful in breaking through is giving people examples of things that are logically disruptive of European domination being rational. So I'll give one example. So an American national historical mythology is this notion that these white people were leaving monarchies, came to the United States, what is now called the United States, and developed the greatest experiment of democracy the world has ever seen. So that's the mythology that we're conditioned into. We heard a bunch of that this past weekend, 4th of July, all that. What a lot of people don't know is that before Europeans got here and the Northeast region of what's called the United States, the Iroquois Federation was practicing a form of democratic governance that the European colonists actually observed and emulated. Benjamin Franklin and his plan for Albany in terms of how the colonies would come together studied the Iroquois Federation's constitution. That in 1987, the U.S. Senate actually passed a resolution acknowledging the Iroquois' contribution to the U.S. Constitution. So the mythology that we're taught, these white people came from Europe and established a form of governance that they had never practiced themselves, and just magically by divine providence developed this democratic system, is objectively absurd and irrational. The problem is that version of history for most of our people is the only version they've ever been explained to about the foundation of America and its government. Yeah. When you add that element into it, I think for some people, and it's one of those things you can go check. Like, so I said it, you can go check. It's actually not hard to check the validity of that claim about the Iroquois Federation. Yeah. So then a person goes and looks it up, and that's a crack, right? Because now they're like, oh, this thing that for me for all these years I thought made sense. Yeah. I have a clear, observable thing to be able to point to and say, I guess I need to go back and rethink. It then alerts them like, oh, wow, I'm in this Eurocentric intellectual and cultural incubator. I had no clue. But the only way that they would know is information that they were presented to that contradicts that dominant mythology. They go to look it up for themselves. And it's like, damn, So I think that's the work to get people, because I think once a person has that experience, then you don't got to convince them that they need an African-centered analysis. It'll be necessary. And
I think I'm saying something different, though. And I think what I'm saying, I appreciate what you're saying. I agree with what you're saying. Now, I think I'm looking at this at different levels, right? And I'm probably looking at this from maybe an academic level on one hand. And I'm saying that what I find in academia is that out of all the things we talk about, even leftist type of angles, African-centeredness, an African-centered perspective is shut out. It is like a anathema. I mean, we might have some spaces, and there is even a struggle there. You can teach every other form of political, not every other form, but many other forms, all the way up to leftist politics and feminism and all that, right? But African-centered thought is cut out. I'm talking about real strong African-centered thought. I'm not talking about this pseudo stuff. Right. But what I'm saying is I'm not arguing that everybody needs to learn it. I'm saying we need to make it a part of the culture, quite like feminists. Most people out here right now, a lot of us are out here operating with these cultures that we don't even know where we picked them up. That's right. All of us, actually. That's right. To some degree. Like, and what's pervasive in many of our minds is feminist ideology, liberal ideology, and even manospiric ideologies and FBA ideology. What I'm suggesting is that they didn't study that. That was inculcated, that was passed down culturally. So I'm not even suggesting that everybody go pick up a book, because it's never going to happen. But what I am saying that we have to be stronger as academics, as policymakers, as whatever we're doing, as people who advocate and in teaching and living and acting these things out. I'm not saying you have to know the Nguzo Saba. I am saying that what works for Black and African people, you can come up with a new American African word if you want. I'm just saying that which is healthy for us psychologically, mentally, physically, spiritually, what have you, and politically. So that which will not have us turn against each other. Because I'm telling you, when we don't have that analysis, everything else flies. And I'm telling you, that's what's winning. I'm not saying these other things aren't necessary, but what is winning, and when I say winning, is that these different identity categories that we become these pedestalized victims in. Well, it's I'm a woman. Oh, I'm a man. Women do all this to me. It's ethnicity or ethnic group or neighborhood or whatever it is. It becomes that, oh, y'all did this to us, and this and we're fighting one another because we lack that cultural analysis or racial analysis or race-based analysis or whatever we want to call it. I am saying that we put these other identities before we put a race-based, cultural-based analysis.
Yeah, I mean, no, you're right.
And actually not just I keep saying analysis, but I'm saying for those academics and people like us who can write about these things, speak about how important these are, put them in books and music videos, because we have everything else coming our way.
Yeah, I mean, look, the only thing I'll add to that is all of the incentives are in the other direction.
Go ahead, tell me more.
You know what I mean? It's like, if you are, I came into my worldview from radical leftist scholarship. That's where I entered consciousness.
Yes.
Because that was made most available to me.
Yes, absolutely. That's what I'm saying.
Right. And so now there were people that I was around, right? Particularly in debate, right? One of my mentors, Daryl Birch, who, kind of gave me my fundamental intellectual foundation, met him when I was 19, exposed me to more of the like African-centered canon. You know what I'm saying? And but I backed into it through kind of radical leftist scholarship. So I say that to say that part of the challenge is that it's structural. It's structural in the sense that not only is it that a lot of people won't get exposed to it, that they get exposed to the worst versions of it, and they get exposed to it in the context of intellectual ideas that in some ways make it difficult to accept an African-centered analysis. So like, just as a quick example, what I mean by that is, it's like, if I've been indoctrinated in a classic Marxist analysis, then if I'm reading Naim Akbar, I'm looking for validation intellectually that's through the lens of Marx.
Absolutely.
You get what I'm saying?
That's it.
And so the problem is, if you're the person who you're going to classes, you're picking from what's made available to you.
Yeah.
You come across Marx, okay, I get with that. And then you go to another kind of like a Black studies context.
Yeah.
You might have a hard time getting to the legitimacy of an African-centered analysis, because structurally the people who are the professors, the people that get on television, the people that get the book deals, the people who are deemed successful tend not to be African-centered by definition. Because I'll put it this way, one of the reasons that I was successful in debate was because our scholars have to read white folks stuff to engage in the world. White folks don't have to read our stuff. So we were reading evidence that was just better than what the white folks produce, not mostly because our folks are reading them and they're not having to read us. So our stuff is taking them in consideration in ways that their stuff doesn't take us. So I use that as an example to say that if you're just a person who you come across it, but structurally you're not going to get to, there are very few Black studies programs that are African-centered, right? Very few professors that are highly ranked that are African-centered. So I'm just saying it to say that it's structural, right? That in some ways we got to catch people slipping through the cracks when they get to that moment when they're reading Marx. And I've had plenty of students, like, former students of mine who started out in that kind of leftist Marxist space. In fact, there's an organization for whom years ago, some of the white people that were presiding over it were essentially encouraging the Black youth of their program to call themselves communist. So there was a whole thing where, we're engaging them. By the time they got done with us, they were in Africa Change, what I'm saying? That, they become African-centered. But that was because I was there. Yeah. As they were figuring the stuff out to be able to give them access to the information in a way that they can explain it. If I wasn't there, those young people that now are grown people that have an African analysis, I mean, like 35. 35, okay. You know what I mean? Like around that age, like early 30. That's how old they are now. Back then, back then they were like 18, 19, 20. For sure. You know what I'm saying? Like high school and early college. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? And so for them, they were around white folks that were giving them, this is what revolution is, communism, be a communist. Luckily, I was there, right? And they would see me go back and forth with the white folks that were presiding over the program. Yeah, yeah. And to the point where other board members of that organization complained to people that I took their organization in a Black nationalist direction. right? That was the complaint. They didn't say directly me, but they told someone else that eventually told me. So I'm giving that as an example to say that, like, in terms of bringing people to our side, the incentives are all in the opposite direction.
Absolutely.
So it makes it more work for us. But I think our work is to catch people who get to that place where they're like, okay, I see that there's something incomplete. Help me close the loop.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I'm saying. And some. And what I mean by and I appreciate the level where you caught them slipping through the cracks. Because as I said earlier, what I realized, I promise you, if I catch somebody as an undergrad, it'd probably be a struggle. But if I catch somebody as a master student, it's going to be even more of a struggle.
That's right.
But there's still, it's easier, it's much easier. But when you catch them and they're in the PhD program, it's like, and I'm speaking about my experience, right? As teaching, like I'm not teaching undergrad, because the nature of I'm teaching clinicians, right? So they have to either have a master's degree or a PhD, right? And this is what I see in that level. But the reason why I'm pinpointing on them is that they are teaching other people.
That's right.
And they are the most resistant to I'm talking about they're the most they mean well. I'm just putting it out there like we like somehow some kind of way. I don't have a fight with any of these other quote unquote identities. It's just that I want to be very clear that without that cultural analysis for your group, which in my group I'm calling African Senate, Black Senate, whatever you want to call it. You know, whether I'm not saying it has to even look one way. If you want to call it race first, race becomes a token of just, I don't know the term to say, but it becomes just something we mention, but we don't explore. Class is even that way to a degree because, people don't want to give up their stuff. But then it skips over race, class, and it goes straight to gender. And let me tell you what's the most unpopular thing to talk about in academia. And people think, no, I don't have no problem with people from who orient their ways in different ways. I have plenty of clients that I work with every day, and we can have these conversations. So I want people to really understand, gender. I have no malice with men and women and issues being different. But when that becomes the primary issue in our community, the primary issue becomes that I'm a woman or I'm a man or I'm queer. I have to put Dr. Cleo Monago right there for people, and they still think he racist. I mean, they think that but it's easier. And I wish see, that's another, and we can talk about that a little bit before we wrap it up too. Because that's another issue in our community where we don't want to deal with how people feel hurt in these different identities. 'Cause I know it. But if we don't deal with these ruptures of how people are hurt and how people are being indoctrinated towards these different intersections, and we don't deal with it with care, they will become cemented in these, and these will be their ultimate fights. And I see it every day.
So let's deal with that. And there are a few kind of layers of it that I want to deal with. Let me first start off by saying this. Is that one of the places that I know that I'm at variance from many of the scholars and folks that produce and train me is that, people who, and one of the terms that I get from Cleo Monago, there was a range of gender variance in ancient African civilizations, right? So the argument that like there was no homosexuality in ancient Africa, you can prove that definitively to be untrue, right? And so part of what has happened is that a lot of our African-centered scholars have adopted Eurocentric notions like the nuclear family and dress it in a dashiki rhetorically, and then package it as authentic Africanness, right? And so that's a place where, again, I know I'm at odds with a lot of the folks that produce me, but it's just true. Like you just go and look for the historical evidence, right? And there's scholars, Chinua Achebe's daughter, I forget her first name. She wrote a book that is about the variance in gender and African deities across the continent. You know what I mean? So so the evidence is there on that question, right? What has happened, to your point, is that the conversation about gender, there has been what I would describe as a political and intellectual overcorrection.
Yeah.
Right? A political intellectual overcorrection. Here's what I mean by that. Is that it is indeed so if we understand colonialism, we're in a society structured on white settler colonialism, which means that all of the mainstream cultural engines that produce meaning, cultural meaning, white people control. So our notions of gender, our notions of power, our notions of humanity, like all of the meaning making engines of civil society in the mainstream, white people control. So we have to see gender through an analysis of understanding colonialism, and that the way that we're socialized and conditioned to understand gender comes from European tradition, history, and culture.
Yeah.
So for us as people of African descent, it is incumbent upon us to study rigorously what are the different formations in terms of gender and sexuality existed in our communities, because it wasn't like one uniform thing, right? There were variances in different societies. You had the Buganda in East Africa, where you had kings that were sleeping with men and women as a part of their harems, right? I remember going to South Africa and meeting a brother from Uganda who said that gendered pronouns are strange to him. In his language, they don't make sense. You know what I'm saying? When I was in South Africa, there were folks that were talking about transgender deities that were a part of their traditional culture. And the conversation I was having with a brother who was telling me about this was saying that the problem he runs into is that if you are transgender in South Africa, some of the culture keepers impose the cultural approaches to transgender onto them when some of them don't want it. They want to just do their own thing, right? So these are the complex dynamics of how it actually manifests itself culturally across the African diaspora. That isn't like one thing. I think the problem comes in, and this is one of the things that in terms of the language for this, getting this from Cleo Monago, is that there is a white supremacist attack on the presence of Black phallic potential. So what do I mean by that? When we talk about masculinity, this goes back to Cress Wilson, right? The anxiety around genetic annihilation, right? So, and the penis, you think about lynching, and the penis being a very a aspect of the male anatomy that was targeted when you think about lynching. So there is a societal attack on what we kind of loosely describe as Black manhood. There is a societal attack against that, right? That is different from, but related to, the ways that there are particular forms of oppression that, Black queer people and Black women face, right? So here's where I'll land the plane on that in terms of like what that means in the context you're talking about in the academy. The academy is controlled by white folks and white institutions. What they love are victims. Right? What white folks love when it comes to anybody, particularly Black people, they love victims. And so in the academy, their analysis is about who is the most victimized.
Absolutely.
That's what it and because if I establish that this group is the most victimized, then I just got to center that identity.
Absolutely.
The problem with that is that that's an unserious way of understanding how you deconstruct this larger white supremacist settler colonial project.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Because even if I were to concede, some people might say that Black queer people are the most oppressed people in our community. Like, I don't believe that, but let's say I concede that point. There's some people in the academy who would say that. If I concede that point, the problem is, okay, then what? Right? Because the then what then tells you everything you need to know about what their project is. Because for most of them, the then what is affirm me. Affirm my identity, make me in charge, make me the center of the universe. That is, they won't say it that way, But that is what the then what typically ends up being. Now, if the purpose of the analysis is, if that's your analysis, Black queer people are the most oppressed people in our community, if that is your analysis, if the then what is, so I'm going to build institutions to protect them from that form of violence, then I think that's fine. The problem is that I think the people in the category I just described are in the minority of the folks in the academy who make those arguments. Because I interact with people who have that analysis, right? Who will say Black queer people are the most oppressed people. And listen, there is homophobia, heteropatriarchy in our community, and it does real violence to people in our community. I think it does violence to queer people. I also think it results in violence that we see amongst people who are straight, because there are versions of masculinity. Like if a brother is just not a hard dude, right? That shouldn't be justification to dehumanize him. That shouldn't be you know what I mean? So there are ways that the issues of gender and sexuality impact all of us, and we should have an attention to it. But again, the problem comes in if what you're looking for is super victims, and that's your analysis, and then what comes next is then make me the center, make my identity the center. That's not revolutionary work.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I call them pedestalized victims, and we all, I don't care which identity, besides Black men until now, you know, they do it. Like, I appreciate Black male studies, but I see some things the way they kind of,
and even that is an intervention. I mean, look, the people who are killed by gun violence the most per capita by far is Black men.
That's true.
You know what I'm saying? Those, you know, the folks that are most likely to be killed by law enforcement by far, you know, are Black men. You know what I'm saying? And so I'm just saying it to say that I think part of the problem is if we're having an analysis about who's oppressed, we gotta have sociology. We gotta have an analysis of the data as to how you come to your conclusions. And I think to the point you made earlier, for a lot of people in the academy, they say it's scholarly, but a lot of it is like, it's about me. Like, affirm me and my friend group.
Facts. I really appreciate you said the friend group thing again, because now I get the analogy or the metaphor or how you're using this, and that's exactly what I'm saying. And just to throw on top of that, I would take it a step further to say that all this reigns under the umbrella of what we are taught is multiculturalism. And what I've learned as one who's been through several multicultural classes and taught many of them is that multiculturalism is only really multiculturalism like I say it should be in my friend group, going with your analogy.
That's right. And
if you don't agree with that, then you are a problem. For me, I make space for everybody. I'm saying, when I mean everybody, I mean, like, I know there's going to be people that are totally against, you know, all the gender stuff. And there's going to be people totally for the gender stuff. Like, I argue with people. I'm talking about those who like say we're creating multiculturalism, but you have no understanding or no space or grace for your father who grew up in a whole different generation and can't get the day he, him, shim, zer, and all that type of thing. And you want to fight because of it. Like, that is not multiculturalism. That is not his culture. So that wasn't what he or she grew up in. Now, I'm not saying you can't try, but it becomes a overcorrection. Yeah.
That's over. And there's some, I'm gonna give some sisters some credit, because, you know, over the years I've been like loosely affiliated with like Movement for Black Lives, and a lot of people who know them know that they focus a lot on gender and sexuality, at least when they started, as a big part of their kind of clarion call. And there were some sisters in 2020 that were part of that formation that reached out to a handful of brothers, me included, who they themselves said there was some overcorrection on this. And what that led to was the establishment of a formation called Black Men Build, with the purpose of bringing in men, Black men, who may not have all the language and stuff for the gender stuff, you know what I'm saying? But they're serious about revolution and and it just generally don't want to be shitty men to their people in their community. Right. And so to me, that's an example of a recognition where it's like, and one of the things that they said, that some of them said was, I don't even all the way like the idea. Of what? But of having a separate Black Men Build thing, right? There were some folks that were like, I don't even like that, but they were like, they understood that the overcorrection was so strong, right, in terms of dealing with those issues, that they were like, you know what, it's better for our community that folks have a place to go. Now they're like, I may never go over there, but it's good for people to have a place to go, Black men to have a place to go, right? To be able to process and build and do all of that. So I just give that as an example to say that, like, that to me, that's an example of someone saying, you know, my ideology, my approach, I don't really bang with the Black male studies, or I don't bang with, you know, African-centered stuff or whatever. But it's a recognition of, just because I don't bang with it don't mean that it's not no space for it. You know what I'm saying? I think those people are in the minority in the academic landscape.
What do you mean?
I'm saying people who will say, because you were saying that, you know, there are people in the academy for whom their thing is like, this is it. Like, this is the analysis, and anybody who would criticize any iteration of Black feminism hates Black women. Right. So you have people who that's their thing. And I think that there is a lot of that in the academy. My experience is that outside of the academy, it's a little bit more mixed. And I just gave the example I gave to say that I believe there are some women who do share the perspectives of the academics you're describing in terms of ideology, but take a different step, which is, I'm gonna just make space for it. I'll engage it when I feel like it. Right. But I'm gonna make space for it. I'm not gonna chastise it. I'm not gonna, you get what I'm saying? And I think that's a posture that's not what you get in the academy from people that had the perspective that you described.
When you mean these people are aware that they are utilizing these frameworks, or they just happen to be in the cultural
so I'm saying I'm saying people for whom they're not African centered.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? They have like a racial conscience. They have their own analysis. Many of them are usually like Marxists. Right. So they're not with the cultural stuff. And so what I'm saying is that there are a lot of, I know sisters like that who had enough self-awareness to be like, you know what, this ain't gonna work. If we actually trying to do revolution, like, we can't throw away Black men. You know what I'm saying? And so there was a decision like, okay, let's have a different formation, so that folks can deal with that and let them have the space.
I agree, but I struggle with that as being just as much, just because, I mean, I think on a conscious level, yes. But I'm talking about I'm not even talking about people who've been trained in the academy completely. Or know even that they are participating in these ideologies. I'm talking about these ideologies find ways to get into our music, to get into pop culture, to find themselves in these gender wars. And they don't even know where these ideas came from. But also, and what I mean is that there's all types of ideas about Black men, Black women, Black queer people, Black whoever, that we all have, and we don't realize where they came from. So we don't, and even on an intellectual level, these people who have been trained, just to be real frank, when I've seen right here in my own counseling room, and when Justin Fairfax, his name is Justin Fairfax, when that happened, right, in Virginia, right, and we'll be wrapping up soon, family. I knew it was going to cause some struggle in our community. Even myself, I went and said, I think we have to be careful on how we identify Black men in the most gentle way. I was called all types of names. I still kept it cool and calm, but still to this day, this sister said she said I attacked her, and I said, I attacked you, and I said, all you have to do is follow the thread. And I was very conciliatory the entire time, and she says, just because you were nice doesn't mean you didn't attack me. Because the fact that I thought that we have to be careful with calling every type of incident femicide. Just because I think we just have to be careful, because I think that words are powerful and we have to be very careful how we use them. But also just the fact that, for example, give you this case here. I struggle because I've seen even some of the most educated people who know better, when they feel an attack, that academic indoctrination kicks in when on an emotional level. So you can rationalize everything you want, but this indoctrination that's inside of us kicks in when you feel like you're in survival state, when the news starts saying Black men are dangerous and Black women are dangerous, or whatever it is. I mean, I'm not talking about any one direction, or gay people are doing this, or, you know, they're responsible for AIDS, and like any type of direction. however we've been indoctrinated will kick in when we are feeling when we feel under threat. So that is the problem I have. I'll be real honest with you. I mean, of course, I know that people are going to be where they are, and everybody has their job and their role. Like, for example, you have to do things the way you do it, and you're like. But for me, and from a psychological standpoint, I have to do it this way because I understand how it shows up in our relationships. I see it every day. Those who never went to a classroom, they are espousing and articulating these things. FBA, they're articulating these things from feminist ideas and manosphere propaganda. I have a brother here who wants to talk to me about how the red pill community, how he's stuck because of it. I'm saying that these ideas, I'm going to attack it real hard, but also understand that there's much room because I think everybody has to do it. That everybody has to be tactical in the way that they do it, right? So, but in academia, there's no room for it. There's no you probably won't get tenure. You probably won't get a job if you talk about African-centered thought and people talk about all this other stuff as if it's I'm telling you what people call radical thought, and I appreciate it. I think it's necessary. Everybody from Marx to Paulo Freire, whoever. But what I am saying is, you can talk about even what's my dear brother? I can't even think of his name. You can talk about leftist type of politics in school. It's an academic, but I'm telling you, it is very difficult to talk about anything that seems African-centered. It is. You will be under attack, and I think that's by. I don't think that's by happenstance. And I think that there is something that we have to do as it pertains. And I make room for people. Let's keep it 100. I counsel people as human beings every day. And I see how people end up with their certain ideas and identities and the trauma behind it. And that trauma is leading these political movements many times.
That point right there is, I think, the crux of the matter, which is that in a white supremacist society, in the kind of European cultural imagination, they fetishize victims and trauma. Yeah. And so because of that being the way that white people see black people, we are most visible to white folks when we're scaring them or when we're an object of their pity. And so on the latter side, being a victim in a white world gives you power.
Absolutely.
And I think that is the academy is penultimate in that way. I think social media has created an environment where it is forwarded some of that in terms of folks' way of being. It is my experience, though, and this might just be my relationship to the internet. My belief is that I think people in real life are way more mixed. Like, I feel like in real life, people are much less committed to the kinds of patterns that we're describing. Because it's, like the average person is like, I'm gonna go to work, I'm gonna come home, I'm gonna go to cookout this weekend, I might watch a movie, you know what I'm saying? And they're exposed to some of the stuff, but not as tethered to the devices. Like, I think those of us that are engaged in stuff, we kind of just assume that everybody is consuming the world the way we are. But there's so many people that are like, I might look at Facebook every once in a while. You know what I'm saying? I might go to a thing every once in a while. But my experience is like people in real life are way less indoctrinated in that way. And in some instances that I've experienced, a part of what I've experienced politically and socially here in Baltimore is it's refreshing to people to experience me not being that way.
What way?
Like, people, I think black people, particularly working class black people, be sick of hearing black people talk about why we losing. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. We need to, we all need to be Pan-Africanists, or, that racial shit is never gonna, that shit fail. Like, our people in our community get sick of hearing about why, like, we losing. And so the experience I have is when I come to people and I'm like, hey, let's do this. This is going to make us powerful. This is going to give us some leverage. This is going to, materially impact our community. People, my experience is people find that refreshing because it's like, I don't want to do all that arguing, talking. What we doing?
Yeah. I think, though, I agree with you in some ways, and I diverge a bit in other ways. And in fact, we're about to close it. I thank my brother Dayvon Love for his time today. Make sure y'all get the likes up, share, and all that type of thing. Hype it up the video. Where I think okay, I think holistically I just agree, but in a different way. I agree with what you're saying as it pertains to what is found on the internet. I'm not limiting to what I'm talking about to the internet.
Mm-hmm.
I'm speaking about any form of indoctrination that we typically find ourselves under in this particular society. And for the most part, if you're not intentional about it, then you are we all are, but it's going to be, you're going to be operating under some Eurocentric construct by proxy, by unintentionally, what have you. I'm talking about every Eurocentric idea. We can't escape it. So I'm not just talking about feminism. That's just an example. I'm not just talking about manosphere, but manosphere politics is very common. That is more and becoming, and it's growing more common every day. So again, I for example, so that's look, go to a barbershop. You've been to them. It's in there. So I'm not, I think when I'm talking, sometimes people tend to kind of like there's some ones like there's these sacred cows you just don't touch. I will bring it back to manosphere politics because that's not a sacred cow. Anybody can talk about men, black men even more. Like you can talk about white men, anybody can talk about white man because he controls everything, whatever. But so I'm speaking about all indoctrination. There's levels to this. In academia, it's very concentrated with liberalism and feminism. Even if you know that you've been indoctrinated. Now, when you go around the way, we gotta ask the question: what are we indoctrinated with that has our families failing? There's something there that's in the water that's problematic, and I don't think it's. Again, when I'm looking, being at an African-centered perspective, I'm not talking about any rigid form of African-centered thought. I am saying whatever it is that's going to heal us in a collective sense, that we can engage with one another in healthy ways.
Yeah, I think maybe the only difference between what you're saying and what I'm saying is that it is my sense that outside of the academy and social media, that people's ideological commitments are less rigid. Is what I find. So even let's take the manosphere example. Yeah, I've been in a barbershop where people will say, yo soft, yo gay, you know what I mean? All the manosphere stuff that you might think a person will say. Yeah. And I've been in a barbershop where I've been like, we got to challenge that. You know what I'm saying? And it went fine. There were people that was like, I don't know about that gay shit. You know what I'm saying? And I'm like, that's part of the problem. And we having conversation. I think there are a lot of times where people, because of their experiences in those spaces, it is, I'm not saying you're doing this, but it's easy to project like, oh, if the manosphere is playing in the barbershop, then they're not gonna want to hear nothing about no gender and sexuality. And my experience is that in those spaces, even though they do have some of the indoctrination because they're getting it, the ideological commitments are just less rigid. Is my experience in some of those spaces. Whereas in the academy and social media, it's like by definition of that space, ideological commitments are central to even what it means to be there. Absolutely. You know what I'm saying? Whereas just outside, a person like, yeah, that's what I think, but the ideological commitment ain't as strong. And I find that in those spaces, I get more done, quite frankly.
Yeah. Now, again, I'm taking this all the way down to the family system. And that's, excuse my language, that shows up every day. That's right. We're failing. I'm sorry to say that. Now, for me, from a real, true African-centered perspective, I would think about Asante, right? I would think about him saying this consciousness of oppression and this consciousness of victory. So I would argue that a real African-centered, well, I would argue from even my experience in understanding African-centered frameworks, that they don't get stuck in the oppression. I would argue that is much different than what we find in these liberal spaces or these conservative spaces, because conservatives are the victims one day, just a different type of victim, and then the liberals are victims the other day. But what I'm So what I'm saying is, when I now, not to negate the numbers or the realities of our people. Now, I'm not just going to. I'm not approaching this from a deficit base, but the reality is we're struggling, and whatever cultural worldview that we're utilizing is not working for us.
I mean, but it goes back to what you said. Our communities are not tethered to places where they're going to get African-centered thought.
Yeah.
And so, you know, where would they get it? They would have to get it at school. They would have to get it on television. They have to get, you know what I mean? And so I think what you're pointing out is why African-centered perspectives are so central, because even in our familial context, we're seeing the impact of European domination of the world in the context of how the state of our families. It's just that, again, for a lot of them, where would they come across it? Unless you got an OG that happens to know.
That's why culture is, that's why my argument is culture is important. It's not about the academic process. I'm talking about I'm talking about institutionalizing the culture in the fabric of our communities. And I'm suggesting we have to be very strong with that. I want to let you close.
That's right. I agree. I'll say this. Appreciate the conversation, man. I love chopping it up. And I'll go back. I'll end where I started, which is that the challenge that I think our people face when it comes to dealing with intellectual ideas, and we've talked about Pan-Africanism, the kind of Marxist, cultural nationalist wings. The central question is, how does what we think and write and produce impact the material reality of our people? How can you put into motion, into practice, the things we draw from whatever text that we draw from? And that should be the metric we use to determine the efficacy of our work. When there is not a standard, that what your ideas are, how you bring them into fruition, if that is not the standard for how we take seriously these different ideas, then it creates an environment where people are just kind of talking past each other in their ideological camps. And it prevents the opportunity for people to really collaborate across those perspectives so that we can actually be victorious for our people collectively. So again, I spend a lot of time outside of both those two camps. Like I don't spend a lot of time in those spaces. I do spend some time, you know, I'll do panels, do conversations, go to events, but most of my time is spent around people that don't think like I think. And I think that's really important for our people.
Yeah, I appreciate that, brother Dayvon Love. Holistically, I really agree. I appreciate my dear brother's words. That's why I wanted to bring him here, because I could see that he is able to navigate these spaces, and these are hard conversations. You know, like I said, I know if I would have brought in some other of my colleagues on either end, those who I bring in on other days, this conversation would be. Some of them probably tuned out already who was looking at it before. Not you, Dr. Ball. I know you said you had to go, but I know there's others, some of my family members, like, I don't know what they talking about. You know, but again, as you say, most of my time as well is spent in spaces with people that don't actually consciously or intentionally identify or choose these different frameworks and identities. But I counsel people every day. I teach. Well, no, they think they figured it out, but the ones I teach, but and they think everything Pan-Africanist or African-centered is patriarchal and Eurocentric, and that is what I'm fighting, because these things, these ideas that manifest in academia without something that my brother Dayvon Love said, is like, he was being real fair. He's speaking about this, like, he knows that the data doesn't support the ideas of what much of what these liberal victimized frameworks are espousing or articulating, because it just doesn't. But that's a very difficult and really strong uphill fight. And I choose to be one to fight that within academia and within the counseling room.
Yeah, bless your heart, bro.
Bless your
heart, bro.
Say it again, fool. Bless my heart.
Bless your heart.
You know,
that's real. That's hard.
But I do love academia. Like, as long as I don't hurt people, I do like intellectuals sparring, and I mean a bit of just not even sparring. It's just like I just like to talk. You know what I mean? And anybody gets a fair share around here, because I mean I got 5,000 pieces of equipment going on, trying to figure out what this person is saying and doing all this type of thing all at one time. I'm a one-man show here. But again, I appreciate you, brother Dayvon Love. I appreciate your mind. I appreciate LBS. Could you let the people know, I don't know, whatever you want to do as far as how they can get in contact with you, your organization, all the type of things before we get up out of here.
So lbsbaltimore.com, LBS Baltimore, all your relevant social media. We're an independent political organization. We're not a nonprofit. We're LLC. So we're powered by our community. So if you want to support our work that we do so we can maintain our independence and autonomy, become a sustainer. You can go to our website, go to the sustain page, become a sustainer. If you don't have the means to sustain, and if you do, please also subscribe to our newsletter. You can get that from our website. And one of the reasons why I'm recommending that is because there are times when we need the community to send a message, to send an email, to send a call. And those things actually make a big difference. There are times when elected officials will come to me and be like, all right, Dayvon, I know y'all put out the action alert. What you want, man? Like, it really does give leverage. So if you can't give, or even if you can give, please sign up to get our newsletter so that when we put out action alerts, you can participate in whatever small way you can in supporting the work.
All right. Well, appreciate it, family. Make sure you do all the things. Again, make sure you like this video. You hype this video up. You leave a comment when it's down and join the conversation. You know, let's learn to regulate ourselves to have conversations that like this. You know, I'm going to take a shot at this with other people, but I took my most intellectual, flexible person, and I don't know, but I'm gonna sit right here. I know people respect brother Dayvon Love, just to be like real frank. I know they respect him. So when people respect you, it's more easy, even if they disagree with you totally, to digest what you said. And I know the people on all these sides do respect you, even if they do call you a capitalist.
Appreciate that, bro.
Well, anyway, family, like the video, hype the video, and I think I'll be back tomorrow speaking about culture. Something about culture. What are we talking about tomorrow? Let me look at that real quick. We're going to be talking about culture. And we're going to be talking about culture tomorrow. Oh shoot, is this? Oh yeah, that's today. Me and brother Dayvon's on right now. But tomorrow I will be speaking up. I think I'm gonna get into it tomorrow. Do we have culture in the time of FBA, ADOS, and pretendians? And I want to talk about this. Conversation is more complex than many of us are really articulating. Many times we're talking past one another when we talk about this idea of, do Black Americans have culture? Do Caribbeans have culture? And who has culture? Who doesn't have culture? And I think it's way more complex than just getting upset with anyone because they say we do have culture or we don't have culture, because even our greatest scholars have said things in certain ways that have led us to saying and articulating things in many ways. Until next time, family, I'm gonna say peace and power.
When you claim you're Africanist, you're gonna get your mind back.
Generalized Black woman is doing this and being this. That is that is irresponsible.
No,
when you claim you're Africanist, you're gonna get your mind back.
Showing me,
Black and proud. Claim you're Africanist, black
because
and
I
proud.
think
I'm telling
that
you.
if
When you claim you're
as a
Africanist, you're gonna
person
get your
who
mind
has
back.
a page,
What is the status of people
Claim you're
with half
Africanist, black and proud. I'm
FBA?
telling you. When you claim you're Africanist, you're gonna get your mind back.
That's why I was laughing, because
Black and proud. Claim you're Africanist, black
I'm not
and
saying the
proud. I'm telling
framework
you.
doesn't do a thing, but
Become a part of it.
we've been
Embrace it.
Forward to Black men
Become a
being the
part of it.
masters, being
Embrace
in the
it.
control. We must
Become a
have
part
our
of it.
only
Embrace it.
That one of the
Become a
best
part
stories I've
of
ever
it.
heard.
Embrace it. When you claim you're
have
Africanist, you're
mastered
gonna get your mind
that
back.
mental growth takes
Black
place.
and
It's
proud.
been misled by leadership,
Black
for
and
instance,
proud.
that
I'm
thinking
telling
you
you.
can consume.
When you claim you're Africanist, you're gonna get your mind back. Black and proud. Claim you're Africanist. Black and proud. I'm telling you.